And now, without further ado,
Chamath Palihapitiya is founder and CEO of Social Capital, which is a technology-driven investment firm whose mission is to advance humanity by solving the world's hardest problems. Before founding Social Capital, Chamath was a member of the senior executive team at Facebook and held leadership roles at Mayfield Fund, AOL, and Winamp. He was born in Sri Lanka, grew up in Canada, and graduated with a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Waterloo. Chamath is also an owner and director of the NBA's Golden State Warriors. That's what gets the use. Moderating the conversation will be DJ, co-founder of Athos. DJ is also from Sri Lanka, also studied ECE at the University of Waterloo, and his company Athos actually started as his senior year design project right here at Waterloo, which Chamath found while he was checking out the Senior Project Showcase. He ended up funding the company, moving DJ and his team down to Silicon Valley, and the rest is history. Please join us in welcoming DJ and Chamath.
You know, my hips. So walking up here, I was thinking about the first time I heard about Chamath, which was actually when I was doing a co-op term at BlackBerry, and I was trying to add my manager on LinkedIn, and I saw this guy on the other side. It's like some brown guy, but he was working at Facebook. I was like, shit. He went to Waterloo, he's brown, and he's a VP at Facebook? I guess you can do something from Waterloo. But for the rest of us who don't know you, how'd you get started from being a bum at Waterloo, barely passing class, to Chamath fucking Palihapitiya?
The barely passing class part is the most accurate. I mean, one of my best friends, one of the best men, this guy Herman Pack, who's here, was literally my savior. And it's not that Herman was particularly smart, because he was also an idiot. But his two sisters had done double E before us.
Lab
and
notes.
so we inherited every lab, every test, every exam, everything you could have imagined. I was still on academic probation.
Remember, work smart, not hard.
He was top of his class. He was top of our class. I was on academic probation. I got a letter from the dean of engineering at the time, who also taught ECE 100, this guy Sujit Chowdhury. And the letter said, "You have passed because of your labs." And I thought, thank God for Jane and Julia Peck, because otherwise I would have been back home in Ottawa and I would have completely ruined my life. I mean, look, I've told this story, so I'll give the very short version, but my parents moved from Sri Lanka to Canada. My dad worked for the embassy of Sri Lanka. And after 4 years, when he was supposed to go back, through a bunch of conditions, one was the war, and two was his life was threatened. We claimed refugee status, and we stayed and we lived in Ottawa. I have two younger sisters, and then I actually wasn't even supposed to go to Waterloo because I didn't think I could get in, to be completely honest. I had pretty terrible marks in high school. So this is a repetitive theme here.
We'll figure out how you get to where you are right now with that theme.
No, because I'm charming. I'm a nice guy.
Self-proclaimed.
But no, I had bad marks, and so I didn't really know what to do. And so I applied. When I applied for schools in Ontario, you have to pick 3 and you rank them. And I put Waterloo last. And I was like, well, let me put my safety school first. So I put Western. And then, no offense to anybody from Western.
That was my safety school too.
You guys are probably much better looking than us, but you're all now working for us. Yeah. So there you go. So I applied to Western, and then I applied to Queen's. And the first acceptance I got was from Queen's, and I thought, man, this is crazy. How did I get into Queen's? And I had taken it because I just didn't expect Waterloo to accept me. And it was like a Monday, and I was going to mail it in by a Wednesday. And in this case, my laziness completely paid off, because before I mailed in the acceptance, I got the acceptance to Waterloo, and it obviously changed my life. I worked for a bunch of random companies during my co-op terms. So that wasn't particularly eventful, except that I worked at a bank. And then after I graduated, I got a full-time job there. And it was this constant feeling of not, like, it just didn't fit. And I quit, which totally freaked my parents out at the time because we needed the money. I mean, we were struggling financially, so I was always helping them. And by the time when I graduated, I was almost basically the sole breadwinner of our family. And so, it was just a thing ever since I was 15. Most of my salary just went back to my family. So it was a thing to leave a job where you had a guaranteed salary. It was quite good to move to Silicon Valley and work for a startup. And I worked at a company called Winamp. And my biggest reason I joined it was because it was 8 other people, all at the same age or younger than I. And at the time I was 22. And the only reason I did it was I was just thinking about the risk of working for people smarter than me. And I thought, how could these people know much more than I did? And so we'll all learn together. And that ended up being a defining thing because what I really took risk on was just the process of learning.
Yeah.
And you very quickly had to become comfortable with being wrong and even more comfortable with being derided for the decisions that internally are, your body is telling you is right for yourself. That's a really hard thing to amplify consistently over time. And it wasn't rewarded, quite honestly, because I moved down to Silicon Valley. I was working at this company. It was bought by AOL. AOL was rife with a lot of turmoil because it had a stock that shot up. It bought Time Warner. Then they were decoupling the merger and all this chaos. People getting fired, businesses getting destroyed. And then finally something clicked for me, which was I got promoted enough times where I had a chance to then take another shot. And the choice was stay at AOL, where I'd become kind of an executive, a young one, 25, 26, or leave, and I left and I went to Mayfield. And then I was like, wow, this is great, I've made it. Oldest venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. And I remember, thinking to myself, I've just climbed the top of the mountain. And within 6 months, I'd realized this is not the top of any mountain that I wanted to be at the top of. And I had known Mark through that process, and I went and I worked at Facebook from 2006 to 2011. And then in 2011, I had the same decision, which was, when I left Mayfield, my parents again freaked out. They're like, you're making $250,000 a year now. Like, you don't do that to go make $55,000 a year. What is a startup? What is the Facebook? No, it was called the Facebook. And my dad is like, it is a book of faces? I don't get it. And so, you're dealing with this, but underneath that kind of humor was a lot of pressure again. And so I didn't know whether that choice was right. And then obviously by 2009 or 10, I was validated. And so at that point, I start to tell myself, listen, whenever I have a feeling in my gut, I have to follow it. As chaotic as it may seem to everybody on the outside, I'm a reasonably good decision maker if I follow my instincts. 2011, I get to the same kind of decision point because I had been building a product at Facebook that didn't ultimately get launched. I was building a phone. And I woke up one day and I was like, well, if I stay, I'm now only staying for the money. And I left. And I started Social Capital. And it's crazy. And I'll tell this story now because it's kind of bananas to think about this. But I had equity that was triggered on the number of users. And basically the incentive was stay to get to 1 billion MAU, then 2 billion MAU, whatever.
Yeah.
And I left at 750 million MAU. And I left enough stock on the table that today, I don't know, somewhere between $1 and $2 billion. Could you imagine?
That's serious money.
And so again, my parents didn't understand any of that. My family didn't understand any of that. And so they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I just don't think if I stay, I'm going to become a slave to money. Because I had lost the passion of figuring out monumental things. I was incrementally kind of iterating on things. And at the same time in 2011, there's a lot of bad things that were starting to happen in the world. If you look at sort of for example, in the Middle East, there was a fruit vendor in Tunisia that lit himself on fire. Egypt started to see the rise of all of this dissent. There was these massive riots in Paris by all these people living in slums. All of a sudden you would have these targeted bombings everywhere. And I was like, where is all of this hatred and frustration coming from? And now fast forward in the last 7 years, what have you seen? It's all a byproduct of this growing sense of detachment and disassociation with the human condition. Nobody has that respect and compassion that we used to anymore for the people around us. But I was feeling that in 2011.
Was that the reason that you decided to change?
Yeah, and I said, what am I going to do? I'm not going to go work at another social network. I wanted to do two things. One was basically see if what I was saying to myself was right, and two was be a part of the solution. And so I said, let me go and start working on really hard problems again, things that were non-obvious, things that weren't necessarily part of like Silicon Valley, you know, dinner party gossip, but were really about the things that mattered. You know, mental health, cancer, diabetes, climate change, all these things that to me I found really interesting. And I thought, if I do something about them, I'll feel productive. And so that gets me to here, which is what I've been doing for the last 7 years.
Looking back, did you, like that feeling that you had, like a lot of kids haven't seen that, felt that. How would you characterize that? Like, was it like a feeling for like getting bored? Like, what is that internal feeling? Like, you want bigger problems?
So this is a much very complicated way of explaining it, and I really, really, really implore you to listen to this, okay? Because this has nothing to do with goosebumps or something in your stomach. This has everything to do with psychology, and most of the psychology is really around how you grew up, okay? Let me tell you how I manifest when I'm not in balance. And when I'm not in balance, this is when I need to get to balance, which is I need to change something. So what do I do when I'm not in balance? Something in my life that I value is out of whack. It's not fitting. And what happens is I start to feel really insecure and really inferior about myself. And then what do? I manifest that by really beating myself up internally, okay? And it's like the negative self-talk and the doubt. And then I manifest it by projecting it on the people around me, typically the people that I love or care about, the people I work with, the people I'm in a relationship with, to make myself feel superior. What I've eventually figured out is it was the pattern that my parents played out themselves on me that I had been playing out with the people around me. Except the way that my parents played it out was because of our poverty and other things. There was depression, there was alcoholism, there was, you know, physical abuse, there was all of this stuff. With me, it was much more deeply psychological and nuanced. But that was the feeling, when I was out of balance. So it took me a long time. So I listened to my instincts when I got out of balance and changed, but I couldn't explain it until very recently. So what I would explain it to you is we all are suffering from, or benefiting, both, from the legacy of how we were raised. And it all really dictates your decision making. As much as you may think it doesn't, it does. At the root cause of all good and bad decisions is sort of your sense of self-worth, and that really comes from these really important years when you were a child and when you were an adolescent, and where you were validated largely by parents and then your peer group around you. So in my case, what I have figured out is I care about three things. I care a lot about professional accomplishment. I do. It's a scorecard that helped me save myself and make me feel whole when I felt worthless, okay? I care a lot about sort of like social capital, meaning like not the company I built, but the term, right? And what does that term mean? It's a sense of affiliation and belonging to the people around you, right? That the ability to influence and guide and shepherd and be guided and shepherded. And then I care a lot about having a few really deep, profound emotional relationships in my life. I care about that. And so for me, what I've realized is whenever in a situation, I can explain this now, the reason I've changed is because underlying it, one of those three things were not working. And they were not working to such a degree that I was feeling so out of balance that I was basically being, in some way, shape, or form, projecting onto the people around me, and it was really affecting my happiness, and in turn, their happiness. And I really think at the end of it all of us go through that loop infinitely. And what I've been able to do, because I'm fortunate enough to have the time to really think about it, is get to a place to understand it. But it's really important. Because if I, at 21 or 22, had even barely scratched the surface of understanding it, I probably would have made a lot of different decisions. Or maybe if I had made the same decisions, let's assume I had made the same ones, it would have been with a completely different mental frame, both in the moment and then after the moment. And I'm sure all of you are thinking to yourself, like how different, like of the things that you do to yourself to beat yourself up, how it can get in the way. It's unblocking that allows you to do everything. And like, I just think like I've been lucky enough to get to a simpler place where I can just put that in a good frame and act on it.
How do you catch yourself when you get in that place? Like, do you have a process for that now?
Yeah, and now, I mean, like, you know, to be completely honest with you, look, I've gone through a very tumultuous year. You know, this past year, which is the culmination of many years of things that didn't feel right, I have had deep, meaningful personal changes in my life. I got divorced. I had deep, meaningful professional changes in my life, which is that I was in the business of making money for many, many other people as well as myself, and I was not in the business anymore of solving hard problems. And so I've had to reconcile and course correct that. I've had realizations around that a lot of the people that I had called my friends was a surrogate family that I had built around me to compensate. And these were all people that were working with me or for me that I was paying in some way. That's not a family. I mean, respectfully, that's not. Those are colleagues.
Friends.
Friends. They're not friends.
No. Coworkers?
Yeah, they're coworkers. I was about to swear, but I would owe $1,000 to Hack the North. And I'm really trying to. So in any event, but in any event, the point is that all of these things changed, and how I catch myself is like I now realize, like, in that process, there's been moments where, for example, like I'm in a new relationship, and when I was going through a lot of this stuff, I would project a lot of this onto her. And one day she caught me and she's like, hey, listen, we have to figure this out because this is not you. And then I thought about it, and then what I really did was I went back and I thought about all the other times that this manifested in my life and how unproductive it was. And it brought me to a place where, like, I recognized the physical characteristics of it, which is I feel kind of tense, I feel this thing building up inside me, and then I start to feel like I'm getting short-tempered, and then I'm getting angry, and then I get bursty, you know, and I'll pick on people. And, you know, in the office, it was so funny because, like, at Facebook, there's all this lore about me and my behavior there. But fundamentally, it was probably because I was dealing with a lot of stuff that I had never really dealt with. And so now I'm just learning how to find the trigger and slow it down and go back and say, wait, either it's emotional or social or professional. Something is happening that I really care about. That is now, I'm taking with me and now projecting into the world in a negative, unconstructive way. I got to go figure it out. By the way, this is probably not the conversation you thought you'd have. But let me tell you something, okay? I have literally been checking every box that you have been told to check your whole life. And what I'm telling you is at the age of 42, what I've gotten to is a realization that this is the most important thing. It gives you the energy to do whatever it is you want to do. Be in a committed relationship, start a business, be a productive coworker or colleague, be a good friend. None of that is possible without that kind of stuff, really and truly. And so I'm just giving you that advice because, you know, look, you're about to start a hackathon. It's fun. Maybe there'll be some great things that come out of it. You'll build some great relationships and friendships. Maybe you get motivated to go and do something in the world. That's amazing. But also take away that this idea, which is that, like, there is work that you can do on yourself that puts you in a position to be excellent. And it is thankless work because nobody sees it. Nobody values it. Everybody derides it if you talk about it. And it needs to get destigmatized because we all carry it with us. And the minute you unshackle yourself from it and leave it, you are powerful. And there's nothing you can't do. And that's why it's important. So.
Cool. So a couple of things that you touched on. One is that about, like, you basically had a feedback system that you over time developed into being able to teach yourself into figuring these things out, refining your intuition on when you're going to react that way. Are there, like, feedback systems that you've built to help you learn and refine your intuition around like the people you hire or the ideas you invest in or decisions you make? What are the systems you use?
This guy that on my team wrote me a letter this week, and I won't share it with you, but I'll share. Well, I'll share.
It was a love note.
Let's violate his confidentiality, guys, because that's fun. He told me this funny story which I had forgotten, which is when I first interviewed him, I actually only gave him 10 minutes. And I forgot that originally when I was really interviewing a lot of people, my core team, I'll just go back to the Facebook example, but my core team at Social Capital is the same way, are just these exceptionally talented human beings, and they've gone on to do great things. So when I look back, like one of the things that I'm the most proud of is like I've really found a way to associate myself with really credible, good people that are capable of doing a lot of things. So how do I not get in my own way, right? And over these last 10 years, one of the first things is like interviewing and talent. I keep these interviews, the initial ones, to as short as possible, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And it may seem brusque and curt, but mostly it's because if I stay too long, I'm going to fall into their, storytelling and their narrative. And what I'm really going to lose is that core sense of who they are when they're still initially kind of nervous and they're going to be their true selves. Because it's hard to fake it when you're kind of nervous. It's much easier to fake it when you're comfortable. I always ask people as well, teach me something that I don't know, and I give them a minute or two. And what I'm really trying to understand is how well do they understand the things that they care about. Because I think that's really important, because a lot of times things go right, things go wrong, and if you don't have the ability to care about something, it doesn't matter what it is, but something, you're basically like a sociopath. And you're not a very productive person in a working context. When I think about investing, I actually don't particularly like the business of investing as a team. I'm not very good at it.
You're not a good team player?
I'm not. To be very honest with you, I'm not. I was looking at this recently, but I've made 3 massive investments outside of social capital. The Warriors, which, by the way, honestly, guys, I've done come stop. Guys, I've helped start businesses in cancer, diabetes, education, nothing. See, you're dead. And the Golden State Warriors gets the largest cheer? It's cool. But anyway, so the Warriors, Bitcoin, in 2013 and 14, I made this. I did something which created a lot of tension amongst my friends at Facebook, because I basically sold all my Facebook stock and bought Amazon. We have 1 Prime subscriber here. That's fantastic. Thank you. But all those decisions I made by myself. And by the way, when I made all those decisions, totally derided, ridiculed by the people around me. Nobody understood. And I just felt out of kilter, and so I had to do it. Those things, by the way, have compounded at 75% a year. And these are sizable things. So I think I'm just much better when I make investments by myself. Not that that's a particularly great thing. Yeah. Where I'm much better as a team is when I'm enabling really talented technical people, or I'm partnering with really talented technical people to think about big ideas and to feel like they're fearless and that I'll have their back, so that we can go and tackle problems. That's where I think I'm a really good team member. So for me, I think investing is a little overrated, quite honestly, because I think there's a lot of situational luck and timing that's overlooked. I also think it's fundamentally a solitary thing, and the team orientation, I think, is probably a little misguided and oversold. But team building around companies and ideas, that's fabulous. There's nothing better. There's really, orders of magnitude away from anything else. It's the most incredible thing in the world.
So if you don't have teams, and if you're investing by yourself, how do you check yourself? How do you make sure you bet your...
I'm not afraid to be wrong. I I just think being wrong is overrated in the North American philosophy. We really, look, there are certain times where you can't be wrong. If you're a pilot, you can't be wrong, right?
Or a surgeon.
I get that. Or if you're, no, it's not true. Actually, surgeons make mistakes all the time. They leave, utensils or whatever, not utensils, but the things inside the people's bodies. I mean, but I get how certain professions need to value the sort of like the binary distinction of right and wrong. But I think for most of us, it's really sort of like you're either learning or you're not learning. And I think right now, we create too much of a God complex around being right. And we don't celebrate enough like the fun process of iterating, and being able to be in the grind with people and like laugh when things don't work, that it's not like the end of the world. So I think to me, that's probably the single biggest thing that people have to get comfortable with, which is just you're learning. And you either care about that or you don't. If you're a good entrepreneur, we were talking about this in the green room, nobody should grow up to be an entrepreneur. I'm sorry, that's that's ridiculous. You should grow up to be really angry about something in your life that you want to fix or change to make better. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because then all of a sudden, you're not going to give up when something doesn't work, when something is wrong. You're just going to keep working at it because it's learning. But that mindset is only possible in that context. So I don't know. I just think that's a really important thing to really internalize.
Starting from there, there's a lot of kids here who are in first year, second year, high school. Do you have to bring your parents here to sign the letters? But the world's changed a little bit since you were in school when you were doing homework with an abacus. What?
Fuck you, DJ. That's one. It's $1,000. That tasted so good though, that $1,000, my gosh. Wow.
Yes. But what advice would you give kids going into the workforce now? They're graduating, how should they think about the world they're going into?
I think it's really, really, again, I'm sorry, but I'm just going to give you a very psychological answer. I think there's a massive risk that so many of us are unfortunately raised in an environment where we can be tricked to feeling inadequate. Okay? You spend 90% of your time on your phone. I'm sorry, but I bet you at points in time, I'm just going to ask, just be really honest. How many, at any point in the day, do you feel inadequate when you're on the phone and interacting in whatever sites you're doing, or jealous or naive, envious? Please be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody. Okay. Could you imagine the impact of that when that gets compounded day after day, year after year? So my advice is really find ways of breaking that cycle. And I don't really know the answer. I think friends are the answer. I think being outside, as cheesy as that may sound, is the answer. I think
What if you're in Canada and it's cold in the winter?
You can still be outside. There's lots of things to do in the snow. But right? You can harvest maple syrup. You can go fishing in an ice pond. You can hunt a polar bear. I mean, so many things.
Whoa.
There's so many things, DJ. My point is I think if you're in your teens and 20s right now, I think the most important thing is to figure out how you yourself are wired and to try to basically get those things addressed, because it is in a most amplified state than it's ever been. I did not grow up deeply insecure. In success and
no one
in
would
my...
ever say you're insecure.
Huh?
No one would ever say you're insecure.
Oh, I'm deeply. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how do you think you become, super successful? You think these people, look, I've met these people. You think these people are normal? Do you think they're like, ho hum, I'm whole, let's be friends and have a burger? That's not what these people are.
Yeah.
Okay? They're not.
No,
They're
no.
deeply, profoundly insecure. They manifest a lot of that by their need to find something that they can latch onto that makes them feel less inferior, i.e. superior. And the success tends to be proportional to that feeling. That's true. And you see a lot of people you meet, like whenever you meet somebody who's like, I'm a teacher and I'm really happy, that person is whole. That's what it means. Okay? And when you meet like a super billionaire who's like trying to become a super bega billionaire, they're super insecure. It's just true. It's okay, it's nothing wrong with that, but that's just the reality. The problem is that when I was growing up, it wasn't that big of a deal because the things that amplified it were minimal. They were. Okay? I had a StarTAC flip phone. Okay? At best. I had a pager when I was in University
Yeah, you're going to have
of
to
Waterloo.
explain that to everybody else.
I had a pager. A pager is a thing. It's like a phone, but without things you can touch that just has a number of the person that's calling you. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I mean, you felt really cool when you had a pager. I did. Listen to who had pagers. Cool people and drug dealers, okay?
I think there's a quote.
I aspired to be both. I was neither, but I aspired to be both. Okay? I aspired to be both.
Always hustling. Always hustling.
So anyway, so like the thing is like, great. So I maybe felt what I felt, but I wasn't completely bombarded with things on the outside that exacerbated and amplified it. Kids today are, and I think it has an impact on your general state of happiness, your general state of fulfillment, your general state of belongingness. I really do, and I see it. It is a big deal. So if I was in high school today, you're going to do what you're going to do. You're going to spend your time on your phones the way you're going to spend your time, whatever, do it. But just know that it is a drug like any other drug, and you have to find ways of regulating yourself and managing yourself and finding positive outlets to replenish yourself. And don't trick yourself otherwise. Otherwise, you'll enter the workforce and you're going to be unhappy. Why do you think so many people job hop every 6 months, 9 months? I'm sure you have friends, siblings, whatever, that are in their mid-20s. Like, why is it that the average employment rate or the average duration of employment for amongst mid-20-year-olds and 30-year-olds is like half of what it used to be? Oh, I'm unsatisfied. Oh, I'm unfulfilled. Well, is it that all of a sudden like something is cataclysmically changed in world capitalism? I'm sorry, but the answer is no. It's that your internal sense of fulfillment and belongingness has definitely changed, because there are other people around you that can amplify your sense that they are happier. But they're not. They're marketing happiness better than you.
So what do you do about it? Like, you're growing, like,
You got to work
figuring
on
it.
hard problems. I really think hard problems means that you find out something that really upsets you about the human condition in which you grew up in, or the human condition that surrounded your family, or your friends, or something. Because it is deeply motivational, because it forces you to course correct all of that stuff that I just talked about. All of those potholes get filled in. If you have a parent that's suffering from cancer, and you can commit your life to doing something, not only will you honor that person in actually the best way possible, you will probably impact enormous numbers of lives positively, and oh, by the way, you will be mega super deca rich if that's what you want. Because you can't not be impactful in a place like that and not make money as a byproduct. But if you're like, man, I'm really mad about scooters, and I got to solve the scooter crisis, you're actually playing a charade about trying to be an entrepreneur and arbitraging what is obvious. It's probably not going to work, you're probably going to fail, and there's zero chance that when the going gets rough, you don't just quit. Because I'm just sorry, I don't understand the boundary condition where that matters to you. You may be a person that loves to live in the outdoors, and you may have all these memories when you were young of how like you felt whole and complete and safe when you were there, and now you see the earth just getting shredded apart. And so you decide to do something in climate change. Awesome, do that. That energy will guide you. That'll course correct it. It'll get your insecurities out the way. You'll be able to tell all your friends, you know what, I get it. You're going to do your thing. You're going to market your happiness. I'm doing this, and I'm actually happy. And I'm going to work at it, and it could be 12 years, 15 years, and something may happen, something may not happen, but I'll feel like I did the right thing for myself. That's the solution. Hard things that matter. Let's go fix the hard things that matter. Let's go figure out how to like eradicate this like virulent strain of populism that's emerging in the world. Why are people so angry? Why are people so unhappy? Let's fix the boundary conditions for them. Let's show them a better path. That's what you should be doing. You are so smart. You have to allocate your time to these problems. So find the thing that upsets you and pisses you off and go fix it.
Do you have any mental models you keep to like sort of separate out like, hey, these are hard problems worthwhile versus like, you know what, don't worry about this hard problem, or you're going down a wrong path?
There's never a going down the wrong path because that's learning. But we have things that we basically dot on a line of now-ish to never-ish.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like there's just certain things that would be bananas if we could figure it out, but I just think are just truly difficult with the toolkit that we have today, like meaning the toolkit of physics and math and science and our understanding of materials, etc. So some of these interesting hard problems are just not for today. And despite like a lot of the, I think like the PR hype around some of these things, like, you know, like for every year, like the last 10 years, quantum computing is like next year.
Cold fusion.
You know, cold fusion is next year. So there's a couple of these things that I just think are very difficult. But then there's a bunch of stuff that's more today. What we do is the following. We basically sit around now and we ideate. And we generate a bunch of ideas on a whiteboard. And then what we do is we try to filter. And what we do by filtering is we get experts. So we go to Xerox PARC, we go to Stanford, we go to MIT. We have about 40 or 50 like sort of profs and PhDs and postdocs who know something about their thing very well. And then they teach us. And we sit around and we learn and we learn and we learn and we document and we learn. And then we try to decide, like, is this interesting enough for us to pursue? And then when we do that, what we do is, and we say, well, how do we learn more? Sometimes we launch experiments. So we'll go and do a science project. We'll go and, you know, get a couple of, you know, master's students to go and run some experiments for us. We collect the data. We see what it's doing. Other times we'll go get a financial person to go and look at a market and say, is there a company we could buy to help us accelerate, whatever. And then we sit around and we wait so that we're not impulsive. Because the minute we make one of these decisions, they're probably 15-year, 20-year decisions, and we have to get it right. And it's not about the first $50 or $100 million, because whatever. It's about the next 500, 700, $1 billion we have to put behind an idea. There we have to be right. We can't be wrong, right? So like you could say blah, climate change, but unless you're precise, you're going to burn a lot of money, which many people have. You could say blah, internet access for everybody, but unless you get to the right answer in the first version of the problem, you're going to burn an enormous amount of money. So that's our process. We ideate, we learn, we refine, we experiment, and then we basically create a map of how we want to pull it off, and we jam,
Nice.
rip it in. And it's okay to be wrong.
Yeah, I think like
I say all the time, changing your mind is free. I know you think it's not. Think about that, because you probably have like, imagine how hard it is for some of you once you make a decision to change your mind. Because you're so fixated on like, oh my God, I made a decision. Well, changing my mind, it's like, look at these pants. I love these pants. And then, you know, like your girlfriend says, you know, these are not nice pants. And you're like, no, these are great pants. No, these are the best pants. But changing your mind is free. Okay, whatever, you don't like the pants, change the pants. Now, that's a stupid example, but it's like, you know, in business and when you're in a startup, like, it's so important. Change your mind.
And like you just touched on, like, you know, if you're working on hard problems, being wrong is okay because
In
you've
fact,
made incremental
it's
progress.
necessary.
Yeah.
In fact, it's so crucial. Like, if you're working on something that's really hard, you have to be failing a lot, because otherwise you're just basically making a bunch of silly, riskless decisions that you know are probably bound to be right, but that just means you're going to fail anyways.
Yeah, and you don't create something new. You don't add value to society.
Think about like the people who win a Nobel Prize. What do you think their process is? They're creating something foundational in the world that gets recognized 20, 30 years later. But they are fundamentally people who have to orient their minds around failure, failure, failure. Right? Because they're swinging for the fences each time they try to run some experiment. And I think working on hard problems is basically requires that mentality, which is also why I think it's so much fun. Because then it also allows you to clarify who you work with. Imagine the people you collect around you. Colleagues again, not family, colleagues, not friends, coworkers, right? Who also then care. You're learning together, you're living the struggle together, there's camaraderie together. Man, what an incredible feeling. There's nothing better. Literally nothing better.
Definitely. So now these kids are going into hackathon. They're not trying to fail by Sunday. They're trying to figure out something. How do you start? Like, you know, you have big problems that you want to tackle. Like, I don't want to solve small problems. Like, I don't want to build a website. Like, okay, you can't solve global warming in a weekend, right? Like, it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. Where do you start? Trunk, tail?
Well, this is the entree to a really bad off-color joke, so I'm not going to go there.
Yes.
I'm going to answer it in a different way. Let's say, is anybody going to work on something related to drones? In the hackathon, I can't see. All right, fuck you. One guy?
Two.
Oh, you have two guys? Okay, we have two.
No, $2,000.
Oh, $2,000. Oh, 2,000. What I was going to say is, like, I just think that there are probably, I would encourage you to do two things. One is be realistic, which is I don't intend to give you some, glib thing about, yeah, go solve breast cancer in the next 48 hours because it's going to be great. It's not true, and it's not accurate. But I do think what's important is something else, which is go prove to yourself that you can start something and finish it and not be afraid of being judged and failing. So it doesn't really matter, to be quite honest, what you do in the next 48 hours in my mind. It matters that you take away that thread. I started, I created a plan, I broke it down into small bits, I finished it, I'm proud of it, and I don't care how people judge it. Now take that and amplify that, and then go work on something hard and do it over the next 10 years.
I think what you said about like having an end goal and having a bigger picture and then breaking it down to pieces is like really, really important, because you can't solve everything. But if you don't have a plan, if you don't break it up into pieces, like you don't know where you're trying to get to. With the stuff you're doing right now, like how are you breaking it up into pieces? Like it's like you're chewing a big problem already, like solving hard problems and helping other people solve other hard problems. You start with getting information, but where else are you going with it?
Where else do we get information?
Like, what else are you doing? Like that's stage one of the plan. Like get information. How else do you how do you expand on that? Like how do you help these guys figure out how to break problems down? How do you define an MVP? How do you define like what's the problem to break down?
It's a really, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. It really just depends on the idea. So, for example, like with you, right? Like when we were working together, what was our true core MVP? It was basically, can this sensor be viable, right? Under a lot of different conditions that would have mimicked real life. And so you guys, I think, did a great job of, and it took 18 months basically to break the problem down into all these little bits that got us to, the sensor is roughly functional.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on the problem itself, but I think in all of these things, the answer is always the same, which is it's a really unglamorous thing that your litmus test should be, will you feel embarrassed or will people like chide you for that thing? That's the right MVP. That's always the right MVP.
When the answer is yes to that.
Huh?
When the answer is yes to that question?
If you will feel embarrassed, or people will laugh at you at this thing as a proof of concept, That is what the MVP is.
Yeah.
Not the thing that's grandiose that answers most of the questions where you feel great, telling somebody over a beer. That's not the MVP. In fact, that's like counterintuitively, it's probably like you're less likely to be successful. Because you're going to give a complicated answer to all these things and features and functionalities and blah, 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 blah. The point is you're never going to get it done. And you just have to hack something together and ship it.
Yeah, fucking ship it.
Something like that. I wouldn't have used the F word there, but yes.
Definitely taught me that one. But a couple of things. One, I always appreciate when I have conversations with you, is sort of no, that was accident. That was completely my fault. Is that you always end up helping reframe the problem and helping sort of think about something a little bit bigger so that you attack it from a different angle. How do people practice that? Where did you get that skill? Like, what are things that they can try to help like up level or think in a bigger level?
I've never been a very linear person, and I don't say that in some like grandiose way. I've always been a little random and haphazard. So that was partly because I think, again, I've always felt an unease with the way that I was, and I have tried to ask questions and learn about things that made me feel comfortable. And I always gave myself time to meander. I'm not a big book reader. I've said this a lot because I don't want other people's 250 pages of expert opinion on something, because I don't think they probably have it. I love articles. I love journals. I love Wikipedia. I love the web. I love reading blogs. Things that are succinct force people to tell the truth. Things that are long allow people to tell their opinion. And so, like, I've always fed this thing of just like, there's randomness is good for you. It's very, very good for you. Finding people around you that you don't necessarily get along with in the most obvious ways is good for you. Getting yourself out of your comfort zone and like learning about yourself is good for you. Oh, there is one book that I would recommend, which I've read end to end. And I think for me, and I'm just going to tell you, in this immigrant condition or like the psychology of how I helped myself, it's called The Adult Children of Alcoholics. And I would really encourage anybody who finds any of the first part of what I spoke about interesting to read that book, because it is written in 3 parts. And part 1 is, what have you lived? And it goes into so much detail that it was just stunning to me how much of that I had lived. And for the first time in my life, when I had thought that I was suffering alone, I realized so many other people had gone through this, so much so that this woman in the 70s could write a definitive book about it. Okay, that's section 1. Then section 2 is it then says, here's probably all the traits that you brought with you into your adult life. And so many of them rang true. And then section 3 was, here's how you can start to put together a plan to help fix yourself. Adult Children of Alcoholics. It's the only book that I really would recommend. And it's not for adult, it's not just because you grew up in an alcoholic family. I just think it's like any kind of dysfunction, it's incredibly helpful. But otherwise, I meander, I read a lot, I ask a lot of random questions, and I try to give myself other ways of exploring my intelligence. Working on yourself is a really meaningful way of working on your intelligence. Being alone sometimes is a really powerful way of clarifying the things that you think are important to you. These are not all things anymore that are valued, right? We've stripped it all away. We really have, in the last 10 years, stripped it all away. And in many ways, we've amplified the worst parts of it. So I would just encourage you to sort of like work on yourself. I really think like the next great entrepreneur that spouts from this place is probably the most whole among us.
Wow. Yeah. I know, we're both flawed. So I have a question for you, but before I get into that, you guys are supposed to submit questions via Twitter. Somebody's going to go filter those things out and then text it to me. And then I'm going to ask him those questions. And then he may answer them. But while you figure out how to do questions, random question, what are you guys doing at Social Capital and what are you guys doing here? with social capital?
Well, we've always had a fellows program. That fellows program has been about picking some of the most capable computer scientists and directing them into our portfolio and directing them to work with us. So you get the chance to work at companies like Intercom, Slack, Athos, etc.
Yeah, we're hiring, and we're awesome to work at.
So
Ask our interns.
We're here for that. We're here to hire for our own team. So that's why we're here. And I'm here because I'm Canadian, and it was a great chance to come see my mom in Toronto and then come see you guys. And then what's happening at Social Capital is just about honoring what we started. And it's really interesting to read the press cycles and see how inaccurate they are, and to feel kind of like whole enough to not care to care. We've done an incredible job. In the job of investing, we've made many, many, many billions of dollars. In the job of incubating hard problems, we've done, in my opinion, even more work that I'm proud of. And the future will be really focusing on how to do that better and aligning around a core team of people that want to be surrounded by engineers and product managers and data scientists, and just get back to building. And look, I spent the last 2 years glad handing around the world, meeting rich, powerful people, and I was gutted by it.
Same feeling you had before when you would leave Mayfield?
Yeah, same feeling. I'm not a money person. It doesn't really get me.
Yeah,
and there's been several times in my life where I've succumbed to it. But every time I reconcile who I really am as a man and as a human being, I come back to my core truth, which is I'm a person that's a builder. I like building on hard things. I like surrounding myself with earnest people that care about hard things because they share that same passion, anger, energy. And I like learning. And it makes me really happy. So that's what's happening at Social Capital. It's more about having the fidelity and strength to honor what we started.
Sweet. All right, I guess I'm waiting for questions to come in, apparently. All right. Hetshaw asks, Chamath, if I win Hack the North, can you transfer Curry to the Raptors?
No.
I mean, it's kind of, yeah.
No, why would we do that? That's just stupid. Guy in the front, go.
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of yours, by the way.
An eye of your hair. I mean, it has this kind of like undulating wave that I can see from here. That's really comforting to me.
So my question to you is, like, what is the methodology for driving social change without embracing exponential technology?
Oh, wow. Honestly, wow. Yeah, wow, I don't. No, I think you can't. I think the people that own these next-gen technologies will decide the fate of the world. Oh, there's no doubt. Gene editing, I mean, like, think about that. Think about the input. Look, I have the honor of working with a company that's working in AI on something, and half the time I'm stunned at the compute power that we're creating. Half the time I think, what happens if this fabric gets into the wrong hands?
Exactly.
And I don't know the right answer. I work with another company that does a lot of stuff with 3-letter agencies in the United States, and sometimes I wake up and I'm like, we're doing God's work, and sometimes I wake up and I want to vomit. Well, that's life. And you know what? I'm glad to be in the Sturm und Drang of that emotion. Honestly. Because at least on the edges, I can help be a part of some of that decision making. But abdicating that and like not being there is not the right answer. Because somebody else is going to do it, and somebody else may not have my moral and ethical perspective. Not that mine's better than anybody else's, but it's just different. It's my own. And so I'd rather reflect my own than somebody else's.
Well, at this point, don't you think that it would actually, the fact that you said that someone else would do it, doesn't that mean that it strips you of your ethical and moral?
No, it just means that I have to work harder so that it's my turn. It's like kind of like, like a Boxing Day sale at Zeller's, okay? And there's a single line. You got to wake up early, man, and fight for that space in line, because if they give it away to somebody else, That's not right. Do you know what I'm saying? Do Zellers even exist?
No.
Is that a bad example?
Also, there's people.
How out of touch am I? How many people do you think I have buying me clothes right now?
Also, there's a whole bunch of
Shopping
people
for
in
me?
here who are
God,
not
it's
from
so
Canada.
sad. What is a better example? Give me a good example.
Walmart?
Zara?
Zara. Yeah, Zara.
Zara.
Yeah, Zara.
Zara, there's a good one.
All right, so one of the questions that came in is that how do you find the balance between being insecure enough to be successful and being not insecure enough to be happy?
Don't try to be balanced, just be aware. What does balance mean? Who cares about balance? Nobody like balanced people. You want a whole person, but a whole person isn't boring. You know what I'm saying? Don't be boring. It's not about negating it all, it's about honoring it. It's about knowing that it's there, and it's about helping you to become better with it. I don't know. Just felt like
Yeah, no.
Makes me feel better because I'm still bouncing back between security and insecurity all the time.
And at least now you can trigger on it and figure out what you want to do about it.
At times, not all the time and not very well, but at times.
You have to repeat questions if you're taking them from the side.
Oh, okay. True. The question is, he has an idea, but he's afraid. He doesn't think there's hope. He doesn't know what to do. Dude, I don't know what to do. But I'm just going to do. I think you can't worry about the finality and the end state too much. Like, be very selfish for a second and think to yourself, if doing this will make you happy, let's just assume the world is screwed. You might as well be happy until it all ends anyways. Shouldn't you? Shouldn't you? I mean, well, there's no point, bemoaning it because let's just say it's a fait accompli. What are you going to do? I would just say be happy. And my version of being happy is I want to work on things that I care about. So I wouldn't get too fatalistic about all this stuff. I think we are evolving things in an incredible way as a race and as a species. The big problem today is that these systems that are supposed to work for the many really only work for the few, and they're too asymmetric. This is why when you fix a hard problem, what you really do is you level the playing field. That's something that's worthwhile getting in balance. And so I would not get too hung up on how screwed the world is. Instead, I would kind of tell myself, listen, things are going to happen, good and bad. I have a responsibility, if I'm capable, of allocating some of the goodness to as many people as possible. And honestly, dude, if you're afraid of all this stuff and it freaks you out, get to work. No, like right now, get to work. You shouldn't even be here. You should be working. You know what I'm saying? Like, you cannot get caught up in your own underwear on this stuff because it's debilitating. Yeah, don't worry about it. Do food distribution.
Like, we have a value at our company called be a player, which basically goes back to saying, like, you have a problem. Like, the first question you should be asking is like, what am I going to do about it? And then go do it. Like, you can't wait for somebody else to solve the problem, right? So you can take the first step.
And it's not possible to care about 10 things equally. That's not true, right? Let's just say you had 3 pets, a dog, a hamster, and a rat. Don't lie to me and tell me you'd like the rat more than the dog. Dogs kick ass. Rats suck. Hamsters get eaten. There's a priority, okay? Ideas are the same.
That was well played.
That was well done. I mean, that person cannot be an engineer.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Your mastery of rhetoric there is fantastic. The question is, Canadian brain drain, how do we combat it?
2 hypocrites.
Well, why did I leave? I left Canada because I didn't feel I felt at home. Meaning, on the one hand, I felt at home because it had raised me and had given me so many things. But at a much more core level about what I wanted to do for the future, I did not feel at home. I did not feel it was a place that could embrace risk and failure. And I did not feel like it was a place that I could surround myself with the people that would allow me to build what I was capable of building. I don't think that that's been fixed yet here. So how do you fix it? I think at one level, we have to fix the taxation system because unfortunately or not, there's a huge incentives that comes with taking the kind of risk that we take. And it's well established in the United States and it's not here. It's just not. And then the second thing is that I think that culturally, you have to find ways of like organizing around people that don't celebrate checking boxes and being middle of the road, being in balance. Symmetry is valued in Canada. Come along, get along, everybody's nice and hunky-dory in the middle, right? It's true. Being an outlier and being spiky is not valued. And so a lot of people feel out of place. And if you're in technology, you're probably predisposed to being that kind of spiky person. And all of a sudden you see these shiny objects like Facebook and Uber and Google in Silicon Valley, and you're like, wow, I'll be understood. I'll be around my tribe. I'll find connection and affiliation. So that's what you have to solve. You have to solve the financial incentives and you have to solve the social incentives in community. Then people won't go. One, the government can control, and two is like places like this, you know, and like how these places evolve over time can do that.
I don't think it's an overnight solve either. Like it takes time for building the
decades.
ecosystem that can support startups.
I was pulling out of, this was yesterday. I was at some shopping center near my house in Palo Alto, okay? And I was pulling out of a stall or whatever, and this woman was on her phone, totally oblivious to me, kept going right through. I have a Tesla. But I get these drops. And the latest software drop that I got basically stopped the car for me.
Wow.
Because I was just pulling out, and it made a decision and it intervened. You know how thankful I am? It also turned out, I mean, it's also true my kids were in the car, so it would have been a, you know, really bad thing. But these are the kinds of expert systems we're building. You know, there are people right now that are like doing an incredible job. You give them a small amount of data and an image, and boom, they'll know whether they can detect a tumor or whatever. All these things are possible because of AI, so why fear that stuff? We need a better compute fabric so that you could do it faster and at better scale. I think, so that's kind of my view. I think this whole thing of like the robots taking over is a little overblown. In 50 years, we're gonna have to worry about something like that, but not now.
Cool. Well, we're out of time. I have a bunch more questions about this stuff. But
Can I just say, okay, the blonde lady up there.
Waving.
Okay, so you talk a lot about being happy and working on something that we care about. You talk about how everything is possible, personal fulfillment, coming to terms with oneself, but you're
This question is not going to go in a good place, huh? She's going to laugh. I mean, you can already tell, right? Everybody knows. Go ahead. Sorry, finish your question.
But the thing is, you're massively rich, and the thing is, most of us will not make it, and you've made it. Your net worth is $1.2 billion, Wikipedia. And so I think my question is, isn't it more important to know how to become happy with yourself and how to come to terms with yourself when when you have not made it? Because most of us won't.
But did you miss the point of what I said? That is what I said. I don't think that this is I'm sorry, but like, look, I got exceptionally lucky, okay? Am I proud of it? Yeah. Is that number inaccurate? Yeah, it's actually much, much better than that, okay? I have nothing to be ashamed of, okay? So, but none of that matters. That's my whole point. It doesn't matter. Don't label me by that number, which is inaccurate to the downside by many multiples, okay? But it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to tell you is that it matters that you realize we are living in a world that has the disproportionate propensity, whether you're rich, poor, black, white, male, female, gay, straight, doesn't matter, to make you feel unhappy. And yes, I do think it is the most important thing. And there are different weights and measures for different people. And you owe it to yourself to learn about what it means for you and do it. I've started to do it because I got to these check boxes and didn't feel happy. So yeah, I'm agreeing with you. There's nothing I said that is correlated with all that stuff that you just talked about. It has nothing to do with being rich. All right. Anyways, can I just say one last thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's close it out.
Okay, one last thing before you guys go. Go read that book if you care.
Can you repeat the name of the book so that everybody catches it again?
Adult Children of Alcoholics. Go read it. I mean, not all of you need to read it, but I'm just saying, for some of you. And then take the time to take care of yourself. And then you'll be able to do whatever the hell it is that you want to do. And I wish you the best of luck. And I wish you all the skill in the world, but I wish you really the best of luck.